Hello guys, and welcome to a new Wargame Red Dragon video today by me, Vulcan. I have another replay today for you, and this is a 4 versus 4 on Straight to the Point. And it's another game that focuses a lot on the Navy, but in this case, a lot to do with the land as well. Because I combine them together to create amphibious assaults and also helicopter assaults after we establish a foothold on the water. The deck I'm using today is a Chinese national deck. It's actually the exact same deck as I used in the last video. However, this time round you're going to see me use a lot more infantry and a few more helicopters. So not so much naval focus. Let's have a look at where we're going. So at the start here, I've got BJ212. I've got two of them. These are going to go to Alpha and Lima, and we're going to capture these two sectors. Now, Lima I'm capturing, 2 command points, worth capturing. Alpha I'm capturing because it opens up our naval corridor. At the start of the game, you do not have a naval reinforcement point on this map. So you've got to go and capture one before you can bring in naval units, which I think is a nice touch on this particular map and brings up a lot of strategic opportunities throughout the game. Now also, aside from that, you've got another sector over on this side at Papa, which you can capture to get sea reinforcements and land reinforcements. The NATO side has Delta equivalent, and they also have Kilo, which is the same as our Alpha. So a pretty much symmetrical map, which meets in the middle here, where most of the fighting happens on land. So whoever controls the center sectors really controls the sea as well in a lot of cases, because having this corridor is actually pretty useful. I actually ended up having to send some ships through there, and because we didn't control Echo at the time, they did get blown up, but I'll point that out at the time. Now, to begin with, I've brought in some ZLF 92s. These are HGM vehicles, basically APCs with the HGMs mounted on the top. Then I've also got some HQ 61s, which are heavy radar AA. They come with 2 missiles, which means they run out of ammo very quickly, and thus I have brought in SX 250 cargoes, 1 for each. I've brought in 4, and the idea of these is to create a screen of AA along Alpha to Lima. So I'll have 2 AA here, and I'll have 2 AA here, alongside the ZLFs, which are going to sit on the coast at Lima to void any amphibious assaults. So at the start of the game, we've got 859 pushing up with his J711As. And we've also got a J2 heading forwards with 2 250 kilogram bombs. They're engaging onto a starfighter. The starfighter wins that engagement. And now it's time for 859 to evac his J7s as a whole bunch of NATO air comes into play. So we've got an Eagle and a Hornet shooting down the Chengdu on the right. We've also got a starfighter in the centre with an F-16 block and 2 Mirage 2000Cs on the left. Now meanwhile in the middle we have my own SA-342 Hot travelling over to Echo. We've got a Z9A TY90. These are both infrared helicopters, this one being attacked by the Mirage 2000C, and this Mirage 2000C shooting down my HGM helicopter in the centre. Now, before the Celtic takes down my Z9A, I actually managed to kill one of the enemy aircraft with an infrared shot, which was quite nice. But basically the idea of these is sort of strategic denial at the start of the game, bringing in infrared helicopters like 859's done to help me out on this side. Basically allows us to kill the majority of their helicopters before they drop their infantry in strategic positions. So in this case, we didn't manage to get there in time, thanks to the enemy's heavy air presence, and they did manage to get some infantry into these towns. Meanwhile though, I've managed to get my own Z5s up and dropped out my Luzandui to head over the mountain in Echo. Now alongside that, my command vehicles have moved up to capture Alpha and Lima. I've also got a couple of MO1s which are making sure we have recon over the seas to make sure we aren't being flanked. Now while all this is going on, we've also got Iroquois going over to the right to capture Oscar, and 859 and Swingfire are heading up the centre at Foxtrot, ready to push towards Charlie. Now basically the idea of this infantry is to cause a disruption on this road here. It's a reinforcing road. They'll either come over this bridge or this bridge, and if they come over this bridge they may likely drive down this road. So I try and get my infantry over the hill as quickly as possible and possibly occupy these buildings to cut off any reinforcements towards Echo, and then it'll make it a lot easier for our team to take control of the sector. Now one thing that was really interesting about this game is that we're currently at a +2 disadvantage to the enemy, and that's mainly because we haven't captured as many sectors as they did at the beginning of the game. Now my Luzandui did bump into some assault pioneers, and they unfortunately get killed by them thanks to the enemy's flamethrowers. But my other two Luzandui squads are moving on to the enemy at this town. Now they've been spotted by this Kiowa, the OH-58D, and are being fired upon by the M60s in this town. Now because they have been revealed, as soon as they come into range, these diggers with their mini-me's absolutely annihilate the Luzandui with the help of the Harrier G5 that drops its 500 kilogram bombs straight on top of them. So you can see the assault pioneers are finally coming up to finish off my Luzandui squad. So since I've captured Alpha, 859 has decided to bring in some Jiangus, and I'm also going to bring in some of my own support ships to help him out. So a Type 039 and a Nanuchka. And the Nanuchka is an anti-ship ship, but does come with very nice air defense. So that's why I like to use that particular naval unit. And the Type 039 is purely a anti-ship craft. Now it does have autocannons to fire at enemy air, but isn't very effective against shooting at the enemy missiles once they're released. So since my engagements at the start of the game, I've sent my Z9A back to base to resupply, and that was sitting there for a little while. I've also got my Z5s moving about. The idea of keeping hold of these kinds of vehicles is that they're very good for making the enemy overestimate your power. So for instance, if you send in empty Z5s with full Z5s, you can send the empty Z5s in front and sponge up the infrared AA, and then land the ones that actually do have troops in them. So it's worth holding on to them, just to maybe create a diversion, or make the enemy try and shoot down something that isn't actually that valuable. So since there isn't much of an amphibious threat at this point, due to our overwhelming navy that's starting to appear, I have decided to move a couple of my ZLFs towards the centre sectors to help out Swingfire and 859 push up. So meanwhile, you can see that Can't Rush This has sent a couple of OH-58CSs to the right side of Oscar to deny our helicopter presence. The enemy team has basically got full control of Echo now, while we have full control of Foxtrot, which is generally what happens on this map. And then it's basically a contesting between Foxtrot and Echo, or Foxtrot and Charlie. In this case, it was a lot of skirmishing between Foxtrot and Charlie with all these Yakuide and the ZTZ-85s and the Bochongsu pushing up through those buildings. Now, I'm sorry if I absolutely murdered the pronunciation of those names, but I am still learning. Managed to shoot down one F-16A there with the help of 859's Jangoos. My Type 037 already got hit by one radar missile, and thus I am taking him back towards the fleet so that we can shoot the missiles out the sky before they hit the naval units. You can see here the minigun of this Nanuchka is coming in very handy. So let's just switch back to my point of view. You can see what's happening. So we've got an attack by Can't Rush This on the right side near Oscar. Seeing these OH-58s, I bring round my Z9A that was sitting at base. Now the Z9A actually has a 2,625 meter range versus helicopters. The OH-58 only has 2,275, which means my Z9A can actually fire its infrareds out of range of the OHs, which is very, very powerful and allows you to basically force enemy helicopters out of position. So in this case, you can see that he's retreated his Kiowa and his two OH-58s because he realizes that I will outrange him. So now, with the enemies not bringing in any naval units yet, 859 is having a great time of just pushing up his Jangoos ready to contest Delta. Meanwhile, I've brought up another Nanuchka to help with my first and the Type 037. I've also got an Su-27SK here, which is an anti-air unit. Comes with 4 infrared missiles and 6 SEMAC radar missiles. Very good at air supremacy. But they're still trying to bring in many planes to shoot us, to blow up our fleet. A Tornado goes down, an F-16 goes down, and 2 Harriers also fall as well. They basically damage one of the Jangoos down to 1 health, but the other one is still perfectly fine. So although they sent that many planes against us, we did manage to shoot them down with the help of 859's J7s and the flak screen from the fleet. So we did well to hold out against that, but the constant barrage of aircraft later on really causes us to be pushed back. Now with the Crotal being revealed, 859's Jango can engage it at really long range. Now that's a really nice thing about these kinds of units, is that if they have cannons on them, especially like any naval unit with cannons, you can see it has a 5,250 meter range versus ground units, which is incredibly powerful. Since we've neutralized Delta though, we can now know that there isn't going to be any naval reinforcements for the enemy or any reinforcements on land. So I've started to bring in some ships on the right side. You can see my Sovereign Many. This is probably one of the biggest ships I have on this deck, aside from the Udeloid 2. But this one, as I brought it in, got hit by 2 anti-ship missiles. There's a huge fleet over here, and unfortunately I didn't quite predict that they would focus my ship so much with the presence of these Type 037s already firing on the enemies. But fortunately though, I am managing to get a couple of Nanuchkas in before they fire any more anti-ship missiles at my Sovereign. Now at the top here you can see we've lost one of the Django's, but I still have my 2 Nanuchkas and my Type 037. On the way I've got 4 Type 068 U-Kings, which are landing craft which are carrying 4 units of Lu Zhangduai, and they're hoping to successfully land at Delta. But now, also to help out, I brought up a Type 037 to kill the rest of these ships. So you can see I get a nice hit with that Type 037 onto the Pohang, and we've already sunk one of the NATO ships, and Askrab is moving away his Congo. So thanks to the advancement of my own naval forces, we have managed to push out the enemy's fleet. And since I have missile ships, I don't decide to follow them round the edge of the island. Instead, keep my distance and wait for them to come back. Now 859's managed to get a really nice position in these buildings here. And you can see that he's got some tanker Shashal, which have 82mm heat SPGs. And if any tanks get close to them, they're going to die very quickly. And you see, on this side, we're constantly being harassed by anti-radar missiles. A Jaguar A comes in and does manage to get the killing blow onto our last Jiangu. And this leaves me very vulnerable. My amphibious craft have just got here. There's 4 units of infantry ready to land onto the shore with their APCs and kill the command vehicle that's still contesting. Meanwhile on the right, I've got more of a fleet now. Brought in 4 Komars. These are basically little corvettes that run around with 2 missile pods on the back, release the 2 missiles and they're out of ammo. Now, since they've got their reinforcement point back, they can now bring in reinforcements. But my Nanuchka's not having any of it. The gun on the back, 76mm, does manage to get a few shots onto some of the APCs as they advance into the town. And I'm basically trying to manage this navy while also managing this navy on this side, which unfortunately I lose one of the Type 037 destroyers thanks to a anti-ship missile coming over the island. Now I have my Su-27SK again flying around behind my fleet. Ideally I should have probably brought it forwards to sit directly over my fleet, but I didn't notice at the time and it allowed the enemy to bring forwards their airplanes. Now a tornado comes in, managed to get a shot onto my first 2 ships, then a starfighter comes in, picks off the last one. Meanwhile, my amphibious landing is getting annihilated by artillery, and with the introduction of the Hatsu Yuki, the main cannon of this ship annihilates the rest of them. And that was a failed amphibious assault there, with 1 man remaining until he gets hit directly by the ship. And now we've lost my fleet there. I have to evac my Su-27SK and instead bring in an Su-27K, the K being the one with the anti-ship missile. Unfortunately, that anti-ship missile does get taken out by the Hatsu Yuki's minigun. So 859's not having any of it. He's decided to bring in his Udaloy. Now the Udaloy is firing 2 missiles at once. And you can see that as the Hatsu Yuki fails to shoot those radar missiles out the sky, it does get sunk by a direct hit. So now, we're at a bit of a stalemate here. If they come round the corner, they will be engaged by my Sovereign, my Nanuchkas, each with 6 anti-ship missiles. My Sovereign actually run out and is on pretty low health, but it still can pack quite a punch with its dual AK 130mm cannons. Now furthermore, I also tried to move my Comars round to the right side of this island to possibly flank, but I thought it best to keep all my ships together so that we could use the autocannons to create a flak screen in case they decided to use more air against me. Now on the left side, I've also decided to bring in Comars. Now, like I said before, Comars are sole purpose anti-ship craft. But because they were bringing in more ships at Delta, I thought it appropriate that the Comars should be brought in on this side. So I've invested majority into sea so far with the help of 859 and his larger craft. So I've been using my large units on the right, my Sovereign, and while 859's been using his Jangus and his Udaloys on the left. Now I've been trying to support him any way I can with my own naval forces, but since the majority of my navy was on this side, I've since been reinforcing this. Now Swingfire has been using this Chongju throughout the game. It actually has a 122mm rocket pod and fires nice barrages at enemy forces. In this case, he's firing it at the enemy navy. And it's surprising actually how much damage the rockets can do to the enemy. That in this case, the Hatsuyuki taking 2 bars of damage. Now since I thought my position was inferior, I decided to move my navy round to the right. I brought in a Su-27 SK to try and gain air supremacy, but as you can see, if I change to the neutral perspective, the enemy has actually cleverly placed AA on this island, which makes it pretty much impossible for me to support my navy with air units. Now realizing this, I have stopped my navy, and with another one of my Su-27Ks coming into the fray, I do end up turning that around and evacing it when I originally intended to use it to destroy any ships on the right side of the island. Now back to my Comars. Now the reason these Comars weren't firing is because they actually only have 5,250 meter range versus ships, which although sounds a lot, isn't much on the naval side of things. These Jangus, for example, have a range of 8,750 meters, and that's the longest range you can get in the game. So here you can see 859 using some PHL 81s to spread a rocket barrage over the entirety of Charlie, softening up the enemy, ready for an assault. I've got my navy still continuing round to the right side. I spot the LCM that dropped off the enemy AA. And we also spot a howitzer boat, which gets hit by the rockets from the Nanuchka, but I accidentally waste all of the rockets from my Comars, which wasn't exactly planned. Either way, because I've used up those rockets on the Comars now, I've got to send them back to base ASAP to get reloaded. Now, seeing my presence on this side of the island, they have responded by beginning to send some ships in that direction. Swingfire has been sending some Type 037s on the left side of the island. And I don't know why he did this throughout the game, because it would have been ideal for him to keep his navy with my navy. My navy's like much larger, much more secure, whereas he was sending these Type 037s up on their own, and they were getting annihilated by the heavier ships of the NATO side. Now, because we've now secured Delta again, this time with 3 command ships, I didn't think we would need the Comars again, so I begin to send them down the river towards Foxtrot. And since deciding that it was going to be impossible to attack around the right side of this island due to their reinforcement point being here, I basically begin to move my navy back round to the left. Now, since the rocket barrage was taking place in Charlie, 859 brought up another Jiangu to assault Charlie as well. And with the help of the Jiangu, you can see that we do get a nice couple of kills onto the M1IP Abrams that were heading towards Foxtrot. Any other forces that get revealed also suffer a similar fate. See the VAB T-20 there getting annihilated by the cannons of the Jiangu. It's amazing how powerful a naval barrage can be in this game. So since the majority of the enemy navy are on this side of the map, I am now pushing through my Comars through the centre of the map. I've also got 4 Comars near the beach being resupplied by my Mi-6s. Now, while that's happening, I'm also going to send my Sovereign back towards these Mi-6s, and I've also got the Nonuchkas and the Type 037 waiting on this corner for any naval vessels to pass by. Now, since it looked empty, I wasn't too scared of putting my Comars through this little gap. However, upon arrival, you can see that the autocannons that my Comars have are no match for the amount of infantry, heavy hogs and Bradleys that the enemy have. So there's 2 Bradleys on this bridge here. We've got a heavy hog just stunning the hell out of my ships with its grenade launchers and rockets, and I've also got 2 light rifleman squads that peppered them on the way past. Now, ideally, the Comars would have shot down these heavy hogs pretty quickly, but because they were under so much fire from both the Bradleys and the heavy hogs, they didn't last very long, and they don't exactly have the most health out of all of the ships you can buy. It only cost 30 points each. I wasn't too concerned points wise that I was losing that many forces, but we are now at a +5 advantage after managing to kill the CV in Charlie with the help of 859. Did a really good job of that, and then he captured it with his Jiangu, and also neutralizing Delta. And neutralizing Delta has allowed me to prepare an air attack. You can see 4 of my Z5s coming in with Lu Zhanduai, and I also had a couple lower down, which unfortunately one got shot down, and then the second one goes down to a unit of chasseurs in the building, which then dies to the Jiangu of 857. So I bump into some enemy forces, and it gives targets to the naval vessels offshore. A couple of Lu Zhanduai unfortunately have a crash landing, but the other 2 do manage to get reasonably safe landings, only losing 5 men when the helicopters blow up next to them. I managed to get a kill onto their VAB PC as my Luzandui pushes towards the enemy. And you can see in terms of score, the Blue 4 actually managed to get to 376 points before we started to push them back, which really shows how close this game could have been. But I'm now solely focused on pushing the enemy out of Delta with all these Luzandui, as the enemy pushes some Lafayettes and Pohangs around the right side of this island. And they've also got 2 Type 21 frigates. They've got a Congo and an Oliver Hazard Perry, and furthermore a Donghae, all waiting behind this island. But I'm just more concerned about pushing over here. You see a really nice artillery barrage from the enemy manages to destroy the Udaloy and the Jianghu after they both took heavy hits from air units. And now the Celtics have been brought up from the enemy to shoot down my supporting choppers, including my Mi-8T that brought in my Zihuiban, which are a command unit which I dropped in the sector in order to keep control or keep the place neutralized in case the Jianghu died. But with my assault in place on that side of the map, we do indeed win the game. I think this was the game that I really enjoyed the most and really showed the most potential for Wargame Red Dragon. Now, in the previous 2 videos, I shown you the land aspect of the game, where I got absolutely annihilated by Smirches, and the second game, where I used long-range anti-ship craft to take out the enemy on the sea, and then sort of steamrolling the game because of that. Which makes it seem that the naval side of things is what they are solely focusing on. However, it's very apparent in this game in particular that you can see that amphibious assaults are very important, and that both mixes the land element and the naval element. Now, I kind of think that they need to introduce some land vehicles that can deal significant damage to naval vessels other than artillery. I still think that they need like an anti-ship missile that can be fired offshore. But then again, the air side of things, with some air units being very powerful, they can take out the enemy ships from miles away. So it's a bit of a balance issue, really, but I think there's so much potential for these naval engagements to be really cool and actually make a huge impact on the land side of things as well as on the sea side of things. So I'm really excited for Red Dragon. Now, hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. I did try my best in this game, and I did manage to get a decent score, but 859 outclassed us all with 3,735 kills to 1,280 losses. Looks like he's already got a nice grasp of this game. And even on the enemy team, we got Crab here with 1,520 kills to 720 losses, and he even lost they lost the game. So there are people who are already getting the hang of this whole naval and land combat, which is nice to see because it makes it promising for other people who may look at the game now and think, how the hell am I supposed to do that? Now, I'm kind of in that position right now, but I'm sure I'll learn soon enough. And once I do, I'll pass the information on to you guys. Once again, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.